Hello, Dreamer. I'm Alina Rain. I'm a trauma conscious, intuitive practitioner. I work with energy healing, archetypal frameworks, and tarot, and I integrate principles from somatic healing, parts work, and EMDR informed approaches. The focus of my work is helping people understand what is actually happening in their nervous system, their patterns, and their decision points, so they can respond with awareness instead of reflex. This isn't therapy and it isn't spiritual performance either. I don't fix or save. I help people see more clearly where they are and what's influencing them, so they have more choice in how they move forward. What becomes possible always depends on the person and what they're ready to engage with. This collective reading is designed to be timeless, but it's anchored in the energetic context of the 1-1 portal, the beginning of the year that comes with the promise of momentum and fast paced action and transformation. So let's see what the current energy is. What is the energy that we are currently embodying right now? So the cards that came through were the Lovers and the Siren. So these are interesting cards. So you are standing inside a choice that doesn't announce itself as a choice. It doesn't come with urgency, it doesn't come with danger. It comes wrapped in beauty, curiosity, and a familiar pull that feels like recognition. The Lovers is not asking you who you want, it's asking you who you are when wanting shows up. And the Siren here is something that is singing to you from an old depth, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to wake the part of you that remembers intensity as proof of aliveness, just enough to stir the reflex to lean forward instead of down into yourself. This is not about temptation, this is about pattern recognition. Your field right now is potent, open, readable. People, opportunities, ideas are responding to you because you are no longer hiding. And when magnetism comes online at this level, it doesn't just attract what's aligned, it attracts what's unfinished. The Siren doesn't arrive to ruin you. She arrives to ask whether you still mistake pull for truth. There is a quiet maturity trying to take root in you. It is subtle enough that the louder parts almost miss it. It does not rush, it does not plead, it simply asks you to notice where desire is asking you to lead and whether your spine agrees. The energy you're embodying right now is the moment where choice becomes internal instead of reactive. Where you feel the song, feel the ache, feel the interest, feel the possibility, and still pause long enough to ask, is this resonance or is this repetition? Is this nourishment or is it just stimulation? Is this love or hunger wearing poetry? You are no longer meant to be moved by what is merely beautiful. You are meant to be moved by what is true enough to hold you afterwards. And that's the part that feels strange, because there is grief here too. Grief for the versions of you that lived on spark and edge and intensity alone. Grief for the fantasies that don't survive embodiment. Grief for the old electricity that once felt like home. But beneath that grief is something steadier, a deeper current that doesn't sing, it hums. This is the energy of someone who is learning that not every pull deserves a yes, that discernment can feel loss before it feels like freedom. That choosing yourself does not always feel dramatic, sometimes it just feels quieter. And that quiet is not absence, it is ground. You are not being asked to turn away from desire, you are being asked to let desire mature, to stop letting it stir the ship, to let it become information instead of command. This is not a test you pass by being good or strong or disciplined. You pass it by being present enough to feel what remains when the song and the intensity fades. That is the energy you are in. So let's see what truth is being delivered here that I'm meant to receive and not romanticize. So we have the ocean and the King of Pentacles as a choice point. So this portal is not dramatic. It does not crash open with revelation or urgency or some cosmic sense that everything is about to change. It opens slowly, almost quietly, the way truth does when it knows you are finally capable of hearing without turning it into a story. The ocean is here because you are deeply fluent in feeling, because you can sense undercurrents long enough before anything becomes visible, because depth, mystery, and emotional complexity have always been your native language, not something you had to learn. You know how to move with what is vast. You know how to survive in what is formless. You know how to find meaning inside ambiguity. But the King of Pentacles steps in not to challenge your death, but to challenge what you do with it. This is a choice point between living inside experience and living inside responsibility. The truth being delivered is simple and uncomfortable in the way real truth often is. Your life cannot be built on water alone, no matter how sacred the water feels, no matter how much wisdom lives there, no matter how alive you become when you are immersed in it. Water needs land or it becomes erosion. There is a pattern you are being asked to see without judging it or romanticizing it, a tendency to trust movement more than grounding, to stay open longer than it is actually safe for your body, to let feeling lead where discernment should step in, not because you are avoidant or irresponsible, but because at some point in your life, staying fluid was how you survived. The portal is saying that survival strategy has expired. The King of Pentacles represents a form of power you were not taught to value. Quiet power, boring power, power that does not sparkle or seduce or pull people in through intensity. Power that shows up every day, holds weight, keeps promises, and does not need to be felt deeply in order to be real. This is not a rejection of magic. It's a refusal to keep sacrificing yourself on the altar of depth. The insight here is this: your nervous system is no longer meant to be an open sea. It is meant to be a harbor, a place where things can arrive and stay without destroying the structure that holds them. Some things feel meaningful because they move you. Others are meaningful because they remain when the movement is gone. You are being asked to learn the difference and to stop confusing emotional truth with livable truth. This portal is not asking you what you feel, it is asking you what you are willing to maintain, what you are willing to build slowly, what you are willing to protect, what you are willing to commit to, even when the emotional tide recedes and the poetry thins out. There is grief in this, grief for the identities that lived on sensation and exploration, grief for the fantasy that depth alone could carry you forever, grief for the part of you that believed staying fluid meant staying free. But there is also relief here if you let it land. Because being held by structure is not the same as being confined by it, because consistency can be a form of devotion, because grounding does not kill magic, it makes it survivable. The truth of this portal is that your depth has outgrown your tolerance for instability. And if you meet that truth honestly, without turning it into longing or loss, what becomes possible is a life that does not require constant emotional motion to feel real. A life that can hold you, not just move you. The next card in this collective reading is the Tear in reverse as the archetype and the Ace of Cups. And this is about which part of you is ready to mature, integrate, and step into responsibility. So this is the part of you that is ready to mature. It's the same part that learned to survive by staying emotionally upright, composed, and internally contained, not because you were disconnected from feeling, but because you understood, often without anyone saying it out loud, that letting yourself fully soften or spill carried consequences you could not afford at the time. The tear reverse speaks to a specific kind of emotional intelligence, one that develops when there is no reliable place for vulnerability to land. You learn how to feel deeply without showing it, how to hold sorrow, disappointment, longing, and tenderness in a way that did not disrupt your capacity to function, think clearly, or keep moving forward. This is not emotional avoidance. This was precision. It was restraint born of necessity. It was an adaptation that kept your system intact when openness was unsafe or unsupported. But what once protected you is now quietly limiting you. The Ace of Cups enters not to reopen the past or flood you with unresolved emotion, but to initiate a different relationship with the heart in the present. A relationship that does not begin with bracing, managing, or preemptive self-containment. A relationship that allows feeling to arrive cleanly without immediately translating it into meaning, strength, or self-control. The insight here is not about feeling more. You already feel more than enough. It is about recognizing how quickly you move to regulate yourself away from vulnerability, especially in moments of sweetness, intimacy, or genuine emotional contact. You are practiced at holding yourself steady. What you are less practiced at is letting yourself be moved without tightening. There is a part of you that still equates emotional responsibility with emotional containment, with not leaking, with not needing, with not allowing anything to destabilize your inner architecture. That part did its job well. It kept you sovereign when sovereignty was required, but now it is operating past its expiration date. The maturity being asked of you is not collapse, it is not exposure, it is not catharsis, it is trust. Trust that your system can feel without unraveling. Trust that you can allow joy, affection, longing, grief, and tenderness to register fully in your body without losing ground. Trust that you no longer need to ration the heart in order to stay safe. The Ace of Cups represents a clean emotional beginning, not innocence that is regained through forgetting, but innocence reclaimed through capacity, through knowing you can stay present even when something touches you deeply. This is what integration looks like now. Not processing your pain again, not proving your resilience, but allowing yourself to receive without interruption, to soften without self-surveillance, and to let feeling move without immediately controlling its trajectory. The responsibility you are stepping into is responsibility for your own nourishment, for letting yourself be filled without gripping the rim of the cup, for allowing emotion to be part of your lived experience rather than something you survive or manage from a distance. You are not being asked to cry more, you are being asked to trust more. And that shift, while quiet on the surface, fundamentally changes how you relate to intimacy, pleasure, creativity, and love. So, what internal state strengthens your pull without forcing or chasing? What is strengthening your manifestation right now? So, we have the shaman archetype and the King of Wands in reverse. What strengthens your pull right now is not action, not visibility, not the familiar urge to initiate, lead, inspire, or move things forward through force of will, vision, or intensity, but a much quieter and more disciplined internal state where your energy is gathered, contained, and allowed to deepen before it is expressed. The shaman archetype appears when influence is meant to move through you rather than originate from effort, ambition, or performance. This is a state of attunement where your power comes from being in right relationship with your body, your timing, and the larger currents you are part of, not from asserting direction or trying to shape outcomes prematurely. The King of Wands reversed clarifies the edge of this lesson. Your magnetism weakens the moment you try to lead from a momentum instead of embodiment. When you initiate before your nervous system is settled. When you speak before something has fully landed in your body. When you act because you feel the spark rather than because the spark has matured into coherence, and then your energy leaks. Things still respond because you are compelling, but they do not stabilize. Attention appears, but it does not take root. Movement happens, but it costs you more than it nourishes you. This is not a call to dim yourself or abandon your fire. It is a call to stop exporting it too soon. The internal state that strengthens your pull is one of contained intensity, where you allow desire, vision, and creative charge to circulate internally long enough to organize themselves, where you do not rush to translate impulse into action, where you let silence, stillness, and restraint do part of the work that effort used to do. So the shaman doesn't convince, chase, or prove. They tune. They listen for what is already trying to move and align themselves with it so precisely that response becomes inevitable rather than forced. The King of Wands reversed shows where overextension once masqueraded as leadership, where being on, initiating constantly, or carrying the fire for others drained your authority instead of anchoring it. That pattern is loosening now because your system is learning that true leadership does not come from motion, but from presence that holds its center even when nothing is happening. Your magnetism increases when you trust your timing enough to wait, when you let your body confirm what your mind is excited about, when you allow the heat to settle into a steady burn rather than a flame. This is the kind of internal alignment that makes others lean in without knowing why. Not because you are trying to draw them in, but because your energy is no longer reaching outward for response. It is self-contained, coherent, and unavailable to manipulation or urgency. And the paradox here is precise. The less you initiate, the more response you receive. The less you perform confidence, the more authority you hold. The less you chase outcomes, the more they organize themselves around you. Your pull strengthens when you stop trying to be powerful and allow yourself to be inhabited by power that knows how to wait without waiting. So let's see what the block or the resistance is here. Where are you hesitating, self-protecting, or staying small out of habit? So we have the fault line, but reversed as the archetype, and the Five of Swords. The resistance here does not live in fear or chaos or loss of control. It lives in a deep, almost instinctive commitment to keeping things from breaking once they have stabilized, even when what is being held together no longer reflects truth, vitality, or real alignment. The fault line reversed points to a long-trained capacity to sense pressure before it becomes visible, to feel the tension building underneath situation, relationships, or identity, and to intervene early enough that the rupture never fully surfaces. You know how to redistribute weight, soften impact, and absorb strain in ways that protect the larger structures. This is not avoidance. It is a skill set developed in environments where breakage had consequences, where cracks could not be afforded, and where stability was equated with safety. But the Five of Swords reveals that this skill costs you now. There is a habitual tendency to concede internally before a situation reaches the point of irreversible truth, to withdraw energy, expression, or investment just before something would require you to stand fully in your position and accept the fallout of doing so. Not because you are afraid of conflict, but because you understand the mechanics of power well enough to know that not every truth lands cleanly and not every confrontation ends in repair. This is a form of self-protection that looks like maturity on the outside and feels like erosion on the inside. You stay small not by silencing yourself outright, but by choosing the lesser loss, by allowing yourself to lose quietly in order to avoid a rupture that would permanently change the landscape. The Five of Swords shows how this creates a pattern of hollow victories and invisible defeats, where nothing explodes, nothing is dramatic, but something essential keeps getting surrendered. The fault line reversed indicates pressure being held below the surface long past the point where it wants to move. You convince yourself that maintaining equilibrium is responsible, that timing is not right, that the cost of disruption is too high. But this containment is no longer neutral. It is postponing a necessary break, and that postponing is draining your energy, your clarity, and your sense of self-trust. There is also a quiet resistance around finality, around making choices that cannot be undone, around saying or doing the thing that would remove the option of repair, negotiation, or return. Somewhere in your history, truth came with loss, and rupture meant something that could never be recovered. So you learned to hover just above the fault line, keeping all options technically open while paying for that openness with chronic tension. The block here is not cowardice. It is over-identification with containment as a virtue. You hesitate at the edge of irreversibility, at the moment where choosing yourself would mean accepting that something else cannot come with you. You stay small not because you doubt your truth, but because you fully understand the weight of letting it fracture the ground. This spread is not asking you to fight, confront, or burn anything down for the sake of expression. It is asking you to be honest about where preservation has turned into self-erasure, self-abandonment, and where holding things together has become more damaging than allowing them to split. Some ruptures are not failures of stability. They are exits that restore integrity. The resistance dissolves the moment you recognize that avoiding the break does not prevent the loss. It simply spreads over time, where it slowly eats away at you instead. Okay, so let's see what concrete actions do we need to take in the next 10 days to meet this moment, to meet this portal. So we have the creator as the archetype. And then we have the Seven of Pentacles, but as a choice point. So the actions being asked of you here is not dramatic, public, or performative. And it is not about pushing something into existence through effort, urgency, or pressure. It is about choosing one thing to build deliberately and refusing to dilute your energy across too many potentials that never quite get the care to mature. The creator archetype shows up here not as inspiration, but as responsibility for creation. This is not about ideas. You already have a ton of those. It's about choosing what you are willing to tend when the novelty wears off, when the feedback is low, and when the work requires patience rather than momentum. Creation at this stage is not expressive, it is devotional. The Seven of Coins marks a clear choice point around investment. Where you place your time, your attention, and life force over the next 10 days matters not because it will produce immediate results, but because it sets the trajectory of what will actually grow versus what will remain theoretical. This card is very blunt about something you already know but may be resisting. You cannot keep planting seeds everywhere and call it freedom. The divine action here is to select one creative thread, one structure, one offering, one body of work, or one internal foundation, and commit to tending it consistently without constantly reassessing whether it is worth it, whether something else might be better, or whether you should wait for more clarity before showing up. This is an action of subtraction, not addition. In the next 10 days, you are asked to consciously withdraw energy from what is not being actively built, even if it is interesting, even if it holds potential, even if part of you is afraid to let options close. The creator does not work in infinite directions. They choose limits so creation can deepen. Practically, this looks like setting a container you do not renegotiate daily. A defined amount of time, a specific output, a clear boundary around what you are working on and what you are not. You show up to it even when nothing magical is happening. You tend to it even when the reward is not immediate. You allow boredom, resistance, and doubt to exist without using them as reasons to abandon the process. This action is less about productivity and is more about integrity of investment. The Seven of Coins asks you to meet this moment by staying with what is already in the ground long enough to see whether it can actually bear fruit, not by forcing growth, but by tending to the conditions around that growth, adjusting the soil, removing what competes for nutrients, allowing time to be part of the equation instead of treating it as an obstacle. There is also a deeper action here that runs beneath the practical one. Stop asking whether the work is working and start asking whether you are staying. Stay with the discomfort of slow growth. Stay with the uncertainty that comes after choosing. Stay with the quiet period where nothing validates your effort yet. This is how you meet this moment, not by expanding, not by accelerating, but by committing to one creation with enough presence that it has a chance to become real. Okay, so let's see what is the outcome by the next portal next month. So, if you stay honest and aligned, what shift becomes unavoidable? So, both Thanatos archetype, the Thanatos archetype, and the death, they both came as choice points actually. And then we also have the devil reversed. So if you stay honest and aligned, the shift that becomes unavoidable will not look like transformation in the way people usually expect it to look, because it will not arrive with intensity, revelation, the feeling of becoming someone new, but with a deep, unmistakable sense that something old has finally lost its authority over you and no longer has any leverage on your nervous system. The combined Thanatos and Death choice point marks a threshold that is already behind you internally, even if parts of your life are still arranged as though you might turn back. This archetype does not bring an ending toward you. It reveals that the ending has already happened and that what remains is the habit of orientation rather than genuine attachment. You are not deciding whether to let go. You are recognizing that you already have, and that continuing to behave otherwise now requires effort, explanation, and self betrayal. The devil reverse clarifies the nature of this liberation in a way that is both sobering and relieving. What loosens here is not an obvious addiction or dramatic attachment, but the subtle contracts you once made with fear, obligation, identity, or familiarity in order to feel safe, acceptable, or intact. These contracts do not break through confrontation or willpower. They dissolve when you see their cost clearly enough that continuing them no longer feels protective but exhausting. This is freedom without fireworks. It is the moment when the old bargains stop working, not because you judge them, but because your system no longer gets relief from them. The strategies that once regulated your nervous system, kept you connected, or helped you survive lose their effectiveness, and instead of panicking, you simply stop investing energy into them, into maintaining them. The Thanatos and death energy here brings a specific kind of finality, one that does not demand grief rituals or dramatic closure, but quietly removes the need to keep doors open to versions of yourself you already know you are done being. You stop leaving exits to the past cracked open out of habit. You stop maintaining emotional, relational, energetic, or identity based escape routes just in case the future disappoints you or the ground doesn't hold. And this is where alignment becomes irreversible. Because once you stop orienting backwards, your choices simplify. You are no longer you are no longer negotiating with what drains you. You are no longer romanticizing what binds you. You are no longer framing endings as losses that require justifications or meaning making to be survivable. There is grief here, but it is clean grief. Grief that moves through you without spiraling. Grief that does not ask to be explained or redeemed. Grief that passes because you are not resisting the truth of what is complete. By the next portal, the most noticeable shift will not be something others can easily name or celebrate. It will be an internal reorganization that changes how you move through life. Fewer inner negotiations, less background tension, more decisiveness without a sense of urgency. The energy that was once tied up in maintaining outdated uh, identities, loyalties, and self protective patterns becomes available again, not as excitement or ambition, but as steadiness, clarity, and grounded presence. This is not rebirth as reinvention or reinvention as performance. This is rebirth as relief. And once this shift settles, it does not require defense, effort, or reinforcement, because what ends here is not a part of you, but a version of you that no longer has any structural reason to exist. And as we come to the end of this collective reading, give yourself some space before moving on to the next thing. You don't need to interpret this, agree with it, or act on it right away. Let it settle in your body and notice what continues to echo after the words stop. That's usually where the signal is. And this is the kind of work that doesn't resolve everything in one sitting, and it isn't meant to. Sometimes it clarifies. Sometimes it names a tension you've been carrying without language. Sometimes it simply helps you orient to who you actually are. And if at some point you feel drawn to explore this more directly, there are a few ways to do this with me. I offer mind game sessions that focus on pattern recognition and self sabotage, tarot readings for moments that need clarity, and one to one sessions where we work carefully with energy, the nervous system, parts work awareness, always at a pace that can be safely held. All that will be linked below. There is no rush, there is no expectation. If and when it feels like the right step, I will be there. So thank you for spending this time here.